Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into, well, the fascinating world of Okinawan Kobudo.
Yeah, and we're mainly looking at it through the lens of Andrea Gorelli's book, right?
Exactly. It's kind of our guide for this. Think of it as a shortcut, to understanding this whole tradition, the weapons, the history.
Right. The Matayoshi School specifically, Gorelli goes into a lot of detail there. History, the key figures, the actual techniques. It's packed with information.
So our mission, if you will, is to really unpack Kobudo's origins in Okinawa, how it developed,
Hmm.
and especially what makes the Matayoshi school tick. We'll get into Shinko and Shinpo Matayoshi, obviously.
Yeah, the father and son, crucial figures.
And also touch on, the cultural side of it all, why it matters in Okinawa.
Definitely. It's more than just fighting techniques, for sure.
Okay, so let's jump in. The history. Where do we start? What does Gorelli say about the earliest stuff?
Well, one really interesting thing early on is that terms like tutti, they didn't really distinguish between armed and unarmed combat back then.
Oh, okay. So Kobudo and Karateju weren't separate things initially.
Not really, no. They were kind of seen as integrated.
Mm.
Two sides of the same coin, maybe.
Yeah.
The clear separation came later.
That makes sense. It wasn't like they developed in, totally different silos. And there were influences coming in, weren't there? From China and then Japan.
Absolutely, yeah. The original Ryuki fighting systems, then Chinese martial arts came in. And after 1609, the Satsuma invasion brought Japanese influences too. It was a real melting pot.
A constant mixing and matching, adapting.
Exactly. And you even see guys known mostly for empty hand stuff, like Matsumura Sukan, exploring Japanese sword arts like Jigenryu.
Mm.
Shows that crossover.
Hmm. And while this was happening, Kobudo maybe wasn't as big in mainland Japan, but it was kept alive in Okinawa.
Yeah, that's a key point Corelli makes. It saw a bit of a decline maybe on the mainland, but in Okinawa, it was actively preserved, passed down.
And the idea of formal schools, or ryu for Kobudo, that came later, mid-20th century.
Pretty much, yeah. That's when you start seeing specific schools dedicated just to Kobudo being formally established, kind of like what happened earlier with karate schools.
Gorelli mentions some others, like Ryush, Motobu Ryu, but says Matayoshi and Shinkantaira's Ryukyu Kobudo schools became more widespread.
It seems so. They probably attracted more karate practitioners looking to add weapons, maybe, made them grow faster.
Mm.
While the others were important, maybe their reach was a bit more limited initially.
And the Matayoshi family line itself goes way back, right? Possibly even further back than some of these named schools.
Oh, yeah. The Ma family, that's their lineage name. It traces back centuries, like 21st century sources mention them. They weren't just warriors either, scholars, technical people, military leaders, quite influential.
Wow, centuries. Any standout ancestors mentioned early on?
Definitely. There's Ufugishiku Shingbu, back in the 14th, 15th century, connected to the first Shuk dynasty. He's seen as a key founder of the family in Okinawa. And later, Gima Shinju, 16th, 17th century. He wasn't just martial arts. He brought in things like sweet potatoes and sugarcane. Big deal for Okinawa's development.
Right, so the family was involved in all sorts of stuff, not just fighting.
Exactly. Then, getting closer to the Kobudo lineage, you have Matayoshi Shintoku and his son, Matayoshi Shinshin,
Yeah.
in the 18th and 19th centuries.
And they were the ones really focused on preserving the family's combat arts.
Yeah, they actively safeguarded and developed them. Shinshin, the son, even worked with other experts of his time, sharing knowledge, refining things.
And the family tree is wild, famous names from other styles, like Sakugawa, Soishi.
They're related.
Apparently so. All part of that same extended Ma family. It just shows how interconnected these martial arts communities were, especially within prominent families.
Incredible. Okay, that sets the stage nicely. Let's zoom in on Shinko Matayoshi, 1888 to 1947. Gorelli calls him the synthesizer. Sounds about right.
It really does fit. His foundation was the family stuff, Bu, Oku, the core techniques from his dad and granddad. But he didn't stop there. No, it sounds like he sought out loads of teachers, like Choku Shajina for Sai and Kama.
Right. Ajina taught him Sai, Kama, and even more Bujinoku stuff. Then there was Ireokina. That's where he learned Chaku, Tunkua, Kurumambu, the Kua. Some of the more maybe unusual weapons.
Yeah, quite a mix.
Each teacher added something. But a huge influence was this Chinese merchant, Gokenki.
Ah, the White Crane connection. Bai He Quan. That seems like a pivotal moment. Led to his travels.
Yeah, definitely sparked something. He ended up traveling pretty extensively, Hokkaido, Sakhalin. Gorelli mentions encounters with nomads or bandits there, learning horsemanship, lasso, saruchin, even shuriken.
Wow. Adventurous, then off to China, Shanghai, Fuzhou.
Exactly. Fuzu was key. He trained in Chinese Kenpo, maybe Hikuan, crane boxing, and crucially, he met Master Kingai.
Kingairi, that's described as a hard style.
Yeah, more emphasis on powerful direct techniques. But Kingai taught more than just fighting. Traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, moxa, herbs, and this vital point striking method, Shorinho.
So Shinku absorbed all of this, and he started sharing it pretty early, right? Demonstrations in Tokyo around 1915.
Yeah, which was huge.
Yeah.
Probably one of the first exposures mainland Japan had to proper Okinawan weapon arts.
Must have made quite an impression.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
Back in Okinawa, he practiced Chinese medicine, but kept training too. Learned from Yamane Chinen, Chojo Oshiro, more Bu techniques.
And he was involved in some major demos, right? For Prince Hirohito in 21, the Emperor Meiji Memorial in 28, he was becoming known.
Definitely gaining recognition. But he wasn't done learning. He actually went back to Fuzu later.
Oh, really? To study more with Kingai?
Yeah, that's when he supposedly learned Tinbo, Nunti, Sansetsukan, more Suruchin. And after that second stint, he received that Kunyudai Gensui parchment you mentioned earlier.
Right, the significant document from Kingai-ryu.
So finally, 1934, he's back in Naha, sets up dojos, and really starts to structure what becomes Matayoshi Kobudo.
Synthesizing everything he learned.
Exactly. And he had students, including his son Shinpo, obviously. And he even got nicknames like Kamanuti Mateshi, Matayoshi of the Kama. Shows his skill with that weapon.
What a life. Learning, traveling, blending traditions. His death in 1947 must have been a big loss.
Huge loss, yeah. But his son, Shinpo, was ready to carry the torch.
Okay, let's talk Shimpu Matayoshi. Born 1921, lived till 97. He formalized and expanded things, right?
He really did. He started training with his dad, Shinku, when he was just 4 years old. So totally immersed from the start.
And Shinko made sure he learned from others, too. Like Kian, Miyagi, Seiko Higa.
Yeah, Shinku introduced him to his own colleagues. And he formed a really strong bond with Seiko Higa. Apparently considered him like a second father.
Real Gurley quotes him saying that. Shows how close they were. And he kept training with Gokenki, too, until the war.
Right, maintained those important connections his father had established. Then, like a lot of Okinawans after the war, he moved to the mainland, Kawasaki, in 57.
For work.
Yeah, looking for work. But even there, he kept teaching Kobu to the Okinawan community.
Didn't stop. And then he came back to Okinawa in 1960. Lived near Higa's Doji.
Yeah, worked as a sanshin maker at the Okinawan instrument, but also taught Kobudo right there in Higa's Doju. He was teaching alongside Shinken Taira and others then. A real hub of activity.
And that led to formal organizations, like the Karate and Kobudo International Federation in 62.
Exactly. Seiko Higa founded that, and Shinpo and Taira were founding members. A big step towards structuring and promoting the arts internationally.
Shinpo stayed really involved, didn't he? Teaching, consulting, traveling, even collecting weapons in Taiwan.
Always learning, always involved. And he got concerned, apparently, that Karate-do was becoming so popular that maybe the weapon arts were getting overshadowed.
So he actively tried to bridge that gap.
Yeah, he encouraged karate people to learn Kobudo, hoping they'd integrate it and keep the tradition alive. He saw it as preserving the whole picture of Okinawan martial arts.
Which led him to found the Riki Kobudo Renmei in 1970, later the Zen Okinawan Kobudo Renmei, or ZOKR.
Right. He was the first president and stayed in that role for, 25 years until he passed away. That organization became really important for setting standards exam programs.
And he was doing demos internationally, too. World Championships, Paris, getting Kobudo out there.
Definitely raising its profile. He taught seminars abroad. Guarelli mentions helping him in Italy in 95. And then in 1976, he opened his own dojo, the Kujkan.
Named after his father, Shinko.
Yeah, Kusha from Shinko. A tribute. That became the main place for Matayoshi Kobudo.
And he got a lot of recognition himself. 10th Dan, Hanshi title.
Oh, yeah. From the Dai Nippon Budokukai in 87. Remember the Nihon Kobudo Kyokai, too. Very respected.
He saw a strong link between the martial arts and Okinawan culture generally, didn't he? Believed it could be a positive force worldwide.
He really did. And his teaching style. Strict, apparently, but also quite open-minded. He allowed students in competitions, which wasn't always common then.
And that collaboration with dancers you mentioned earlier, incorporating techniques into traditional dance.
Yeah, like the Himokama no Mai with Hiroko Gido. Using the sickle in a dance context. Really creative fusion. His death in 97 marked the end of an era. A huge figure in post-war Okinawan martial arts.
So we've got the lineage, the main figures. How did the actual techniques, the curriculum, evolve?
Well, the base was the family stuff, right? From the Ryuki Kingdom era. Things like Oku, classical Bu forms, Stuff passed down for generations.
Then Shinko added what he learned from others, Ajina, Ure.
Exactly. Layered that on top. And then the big one, the Chinese techniques from Gokenki and Kingai. Nonti, Tinbai, Sansetsukon, Suruchin.
He blended all that together. Was it just like collecting moves, or was there a principle behind it?
It seems more integrated than just collecting. Gorelli suggests Shinku focused on practicality, effectiveness, taking functional parts from each system and weaving them into something cohesive, understanding the principles behind the weapons.
Ah, okay. Not just a grab bag, but a real synthesis. And Shinbu built on that.
Yeah, he learned from his dad, from Keian Higa Gokenki,
Yeah.
added his own understanding. And it was really Shinpo and his senior students who formalized the kata system.
Okay.
And they created the Hushundo, those basic training drills for the different weapons.
Right. Kata being the forms, Hushundo the basic exercises. So they structured the curriculum. And a key thing about Matayoshi's style is the emphasis on paired training. Kumiwaza, bunkai.
Big time. Understanding the application, the bunkai, is fundamental. It's not just doing the kata solo, it's figuring out why you're doing the movements, how they work against an opponent. Maybe more emphasis than some other schools put on it.
Makes sense. And the system wasn't static. Shinpo students were developing new bunkai, even new base kata with his okay.
Yeah, it was evolving. Gorelli even notes some differences between the official published program and what was actually taught at the Kuchikan in the 90s. Suggests maybe some more advanced or specialized stuff wasn't widely shared.
Interesting. And sadly, after Shinpu died, there was some fragmentation.
Yeah, that tends to happen. Different senior students carry on based on their own understanding, leading to variations.
Okay. Let's get into the weapons themselves. Guarelli groups them. Long, short, soft limber, and double. Quite the arsenal.
It really is. And each one has its own story, its own way of being used. Starting with long weapons. The buj is king, right? The
Yeah.
staff.
Bujutsu. The fundamental weapon, root of all long weapons. Ancient history in China, Okinawa. Links to carrying poles, everyday tools.
Definitely. Chinese, Japanese influences. The wood matters too. Oak, plum, different palms. And the Okinawan bu is a bit different from the Japanese one, isn't it?
Yeah, length can vary more. The grip, the techniques, and the shape isn't always round, square, octagonal, that common biconical shape tapering in the middle.
Right. And learning the bu gives you a base for other long weapons, like the oku, nantibo, chugama.
So the Matayoshi Bu program includes those hujundo from Shimpo and specific kata, shushi no kan, cham no kan.
Sakugawa no kan, sometimes called Chininyamani no kan, Chikin no kan, Shishi no kan. Yeah. Plus the partner drills, Kumiwaza and Oyo, for application. And apparently there were other bukata taught in the past too.
Okay. Then okujutsu, the oar, attributed to Akachu, the fisherman. Surprisingly potent weapon.
Very. Good for offense and defense, and that Sunakaki technique, throwing sand. Clever. The fisherman's sword.
Where did Matayoshi get oku techniques?
From the family tradition, Shinshin supposedly loved the oku, and also from Ejena Chokuho. The main kata is Chikinakachi no Okudi.
Shinpu's favorite, right? His personal oku was cremated with him.
Yeah, shows how much it meant to him. Amazing detail.
Then Nuntijutsu, the perforating weapons, Chinese origin like a lance point.
Sort of. The nunti point itself. Stick it on a bush, you get the nunti bu, like a harpoon. But they also use the nunti points handheld, sometimes thrown.
How does a Matayoshi school use them?
Mostly handheld, often in pairs. There's one main kata for the nunti bu, specifically, nunti bu no kata. Some people adapt bu kata too.
And the last long weapon, Chigamajutsu, the long scythe, agricultural and war uses.
Yep. Looks a bit like a Japanese naginata, but usually a shorter blade. There's a variant with a hooked blade too, the Toyeno Borikama.
Was this widely taught?
Seems like it was more for advanced students. No specific famous kata, more individual and paired exercises.
Got it. Moving to short weapons. Easier to carry, more for defense. Like the ju, short staff or walking stick.
Right, the ju. Length varies. Interestingly, some places teach a form developed by Kanei Katsuyoshi, based on a Japanese-style Shindo Musoryu. Uses a bit like a sword sometimes.
And Kuwajutsu the hoe, another farm tool turned weapon, uses the blade, head, handle, throwing dirt too.
Yeah, that blinding technique again. Gorelli says the kuo as a martial art is pretty specific to the Matayoshi school in Okinawa. The main kata, kuonuti kata, might have Chinese roots.
Fascinating. Okay, soft or limber weapons next. Often secondary, concealable, like the nunchaku.
Nunchaku jutsu. Origins are fuzzy farm tool, horse bit, Chinese import. The Chinese version is older. Okinawan ones are often octagonal wood, cord, or horsehair connection.
Tricky to block, right?
Very. The Matayoshi techniques come mainly from Ire Okina. They have Shushindo, kata like Matayoshi no nunchaku, even stuff for the three-section nunchaku, and pair drills.
Next, Sansetsu Konjutsu, the three-section staff, Menchaku's big brother.
You could say that. Ancient Chinese weapon. Matayoshi is apparently one of the only Okinawan schools teaching it formally.
Is there a main kata?
There's a classical one, Sensitsukan no Ti, but it's long, complex, rarely shown. Then there's a shorter one, Hakuho, taught more widely since the 80s. Plus Hushundo.
Okay. Surichinjutsu, the weighted rope, Stone Age origins, defense against animals.
Possibly. Used a bark cord originally. Rotating weapon, hitting, hooking. Similar things exist elsewhere, like bolas, worn as a belt sometimes. Matayoshi version often used 2 stones and a cord, later maybe chain. Shimpu was supposedly amazing with it, especially disarming people.
Is there a kata?
No classical kata, but lots of techniques. There's a form called Suruchin no Toseki that exists, plus Shuchundo.
And Kuruman Bujutsu, the reaping flail, long stick with a shorter pivoted one.
Yeah, another ancient farm tool for threshing grain, related to Nunchaku and Sansetsukan in principle. Similar things in China, too. Shinpu taught a kata for it later in life, and it apparently includes a kick.
A kick, unusual for a weapons kata.
Seems a bit unique, yeah.
All right, final category, double weapons, one in each hand. Often primary defense tools, wood, metal, sai, tunkawa, kama, tinbo.
And the rarer teko and techu. Let's start with the jutsu. The metal tridents. Long history across Asia, maybe brought by sailors or monks. Used by Okinawan police, could be thrown. Used in pairs, usually.
Matayoshi techniques come from Ajina via Shinku?
Right. There's a hojundush, then kata like nichusai, 2-sai, sanchusai, 3-sai, and shimbaru no sai.
3-sai, how does that work?
The sanchet and shinbaru forms actually use a 3rd sai, sometimes tucked in the belt, and involve throwing techniques. Pretty cool.
And the manji-sai, the one with the S-shaped guard.
Yeah, Shingsu brought that style back from Shanghai. No specific kata just for it, but it's often used when demonstrating shinbaru no sai, plus paired drills and basic kata for kids.
Okay. Tunkuwa jutsu, or tonfa, inspired by millstone handles, wooden side handle.
Right, used for quick, unexpected strikes. Similar tools elsewhere in Asia. Spread in Okinawa after the clans were abolished, maybe disguised as part of a millstone. Needs good wrist work. Modern police use them. Ironically, not so much in Japan, Okinawa.
Matayoshi techniques are from Irei Okina.
Yep. Hojun, again, multiple kata like Tonkuwa, Daiichi, Daini, Dasan. Guarelli even created some variations in advanced forms and paired drills, including against a bai.
Then Tinbojutsu, shield and short sword. This came from Kingai.
Yeah, one of the things Shinku learned from Master Kingai, shield use goes way back in Okinawa, traditionally made from bark, rattan, animal skin, sometimes metal, often decorated.
How does Matayoshi school do it now?
Metal shields mostly replaced rattan, often used in pairs. Shinput apparently bought woke lids for practice. Kuchan has an oxskin one, used with a Chinese-style sword. The techniques are really seen as Kingai style. The kata is Tinbo no Ti, composed by Shinpo based on his father's learning.
Ichikama jutsu, 2 scythes, farm tool to weapon again, used together for a scissor effect.
Exactly. Hooking, cutting, hitting can be thrown too. Techniques came from Ajina to Shinko, is supposedly Shinko's favorite weapon, hence the nickname Kamanuti Mateshi.
Is there a main kata?
Yeah, Kamanuti has variations, but Shinpo standardized a form. There was also a version with a kama linked by a cord, mostly for demos or dance, plus Ojundu and a base kata.
Okay, nearly there. Tiko, the knuckle dusters. Originally horse stirrups.
Maybe. Became a street weapon, then Shinko adopted it into kobuch after seeing it in China, adapting local hand techniques. Similar things exist in Chinese arts.
Taught widely.
Nope. Shinfu showed handling to just a few. No known traditional kata. He suggested practicing the karate kata sosan with them on.
And finally, techu. Iron rods, usually. Origin unclear. Chinese tool. Used in pairs.
All possibilities. Maybe used for water fighting initially.
Yeah.
Concealable, maybe throwable. Used to enhance karate techniques, seen as complementary.
And like teko, not widely taught.
Same deal. Handling shown to a few, no classical kata retained. Mostly individual paired exercises, though some modern kata exist. Some schools just do karate kata with them.
Wow. That's an incredible range of weapons and techniques, and Guarelli mentions even more were part of the system.
Yeah, that list from the 1999 commemoration showed the breadth. They grouped things into Riki Kingdom era weapon arts, Kingai school Chinese techniques with specific kata listed like Sanshin, Okan, and white crane techniques from Gokenki, like Hepper and Hakatsu forms.
Really shows Shinku's synthesis of Okinawan and Chinese traditions.
Absolutely, and a prime example of that depth is the Uku no kata, Chiki Nakachu no Kuri, Shimpu's favorite.
Right.
Corelli breaks it down completely. All the core techniques are in there. Blocks, strikes, jumps, sand throwing, stances.
He details the whole sequence.
Mhm.
And the rhythm, the bunkai.
Yeah, the flow of the kata, and 7 specific partner drills showing the applications, usually Oku against Bob. Really detailed analysis.
And we have to give credit to Andrea Gorelli himself. His book is the reason we can dive this deep. A direct student of Shinpo.
Highly ranked, dedicated to spreading the art. He knew the key figures, researched in Okinawa and China, founded his own organization and dojos. This book comes from deep personal experience and study.
He performed at Shinpu's memorial, created some of the basic exercises, helped Shinpu at seminars, clearly very knowledgeable and committed.
Definitely. His earlier book on the Okinawan bow also shows his expertise. He really immersed himself in this world.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, we've seen Kobudo's complex history, Okinawan roots mixed with Chinese and Japanese layers. The Madayoshi family, especially Shinkoku the synthesizer and Shinpa the formalizer, were absolutely central.
Right, and the sheer variety of weapons, from
Mm.
farm tools to specialized implements, each with its own techniques. The depth is just incredible, like we saw with the Okukata analysis.
Understanding this gives you a real appreciation for Okinawan culture, martial history, self-defense principles. The focus on application, the bunkai, offers interesting perspectives on movement and strategy, too.
It really does. It connects the physical practice to a much deeper history and tradition.
So here's the final thought to leave folks with, considering, the incredible dedication it takes to learn even one of these weapons well, and the effort people like the Matayoshis and their students put into preserving all this. What other valuable cultural traditions, maybe not martial arts, might be fading away in our modern world?
That's a really good question.
And what can this Kobudo story teach us about why it's so important to actively preserve and pass down that kind of knowledge, that cultural heritage from one generation to the next? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Ponder that, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.